It certainly is a privilege and an honour to be here tonight. And also, I'd like to acknowledge Holmes Miller for his incredible legacy for Antarctic exploration and conservation. So tonight, I'd like to split the presentation into two parts. Part one, we'll have a look at my 2017 Antarctic exhibition that was held in Christchurch. The exhibition featured the historic huts on Ross Island and the artefacts within the huts. Part two, we'll have a look at my upcoming exhibition, which chronicles Shackleton's Imperial Trans-Antarctic expedition, otherwise known simply as the Endurance Expedition. And the reason for the two parts is that it allowed me to explain the similarities, the complexities, and the challenges of both exhibitions. But before I begin, just a brief background about myself. I come from a long line of mariners and artists. My father was a mariner and later became a successful full-time artist. So he grew up on the East Coast, the Essex coast of England. And so I guess as a kid growing up, it was only natural that I would end up becoming one or the other. So for me, I started off very early, left school very early, and started off my life as a mariner. I spent a lot of time, which allowed me to sit my seagoing qualifications. That's the Masters and Mates certificates, which allowed me to captain vessels throughout the Southern Hemisphere. And a lot of the time was spent in the Southern Ocean. But during that time, I never lost the inspiration to one day become a full-time artist like Dad. And it was always there. It was always that urge to become that artist, because I always watched him when I was younger, but I never really painted. But anyway, when I was at sea, I was drawing and sketching, but not painting, because it wasn't a really good environment to be painting. You know, the vessels tossing and turning and so on and so forth. But what I was doing, I was making up these very detailed, highly detailed bathymetrical charts. And as you probably know, bathymetrical charts is simply seabed mapping. And this seabed mapping was done not electronically, but done with a very, very fine point pen. So these charts, these bathymetrical charts, for me, ended up becoming like a work of art. I felt they were anyway. And so that was my way of producing art while I was at sea. And that continued on for many years. And I have many charts from the South Atlantic, seabed charts in the South Atlantic, all the way through to the south of New Zealand. And 2005, yes, 2005, that urge to become or start a full-time painting career came to fruition. I said to my wife, then I said, look, I think it's about time that I gave this a go. And fortunately, with her blessing, and we had two young daughters at the time, I did. And the journey began. And it was a really big decision, a gamble, if you like. So the journey began as a full-time artist. But what a journey it was. Going to sea was very, very easy in comparison. So painting, starting out, self-taught, never painted before. You can't expect to paint a masterpiece one day, or at least you think it's a masterpiece, and you go and try and sell it for thousands of dollars the next day. It doesn't work like that. Not in the art world. So anyway, I fumbled along, and what I was doing, I was painting these highly detailed still life paintings in oil. And exhibiting these paintings throughout New Zealand, and these paintings were of historical subjects. But one day, I thought to myself, one day I know I'm going to make that transition into maritime paintings or marine art. And it's a very, very small number of marine or maritime artists in the world today. Very, very small. There's an old saying that you must have lived and worked on the ocean to successfully paint the ocean. You must have lived and breathed it. You cannot copy a photograph. And also to paint, so the synergy between the vessel and the water and the ocean is a very, very difficult thing to accomplish. And only an experienced mariner will pick that up if it's not right. How can I explain this? The ocean is such a powerful beast. It's not like painting a seascape and the waves crashing on the beach. It's much different. It is a powerful, it's that force. And you must have felt that water beneath you, the ocean. You must have felt the vessel beneath your feet. You must have observed vessels, how the vessels interact with the ocean in certain weather conditions. It's a very important part of maritime paintings, and it's something that you simply cannot do by looking at photographs. And there's one thing that I won't do, and that is copy a photograph. I've never copied a photograph. You only use the photograph as a reference image. So my maritime paintings continued on, and like I say, globally there's a very, very small percentage of marine artists. So my last exhibition was held at the Jonathan Grant Gallery in Auckland in 2021, and it was called A Painted Voyage, which documented New Zealand's maritime history. Excuse me. So yeah, that's where we are today. My background now, part one, Antarctica. Sorry, let me just back. When I was talking about the ocean, okay, so there's was my last command, the vessel commissioned in Norway, the Herenga, and that's the sort of conditions in the Southern Ocean that we were talking about. You have to feel that, and you have to live it. And there's can I just digress here a little bit? There's a gentleman in here in the theatre tonight, one of my early shipmates, Jason. He has done approximately 40 years at sea. And this is what I'm talking about. 20 years of that was actually on the ocean. And probably 80% of that was in the Southern Ocean. So this is sort of, when I say you have to live and breathe the ocean. So part one, Antarctica. How did it all begin? Well, when I was at sea, I was always looking south and thinking, one day I'm going to get to that white continent. It's that ambition you have, and you never give up until you actually get what you want. And 2015, I applied for the community engagement program with Antarctica, New Zealand, and it was successful. The premise for the proposal was to go down to Ross Island, photograph and sketch the historic huts, gather as much information as I could, go back to my Nelson studio and have an exhibition to be held in Christchurch. But also there was the artifacts inside the huts. It was a really, really enjoyable experience. And I must say, throughout the Antarctic Heritage Trust were absolutely amazing. And I'm sure you people are very aware of the skill they have. And quite simply, if it wasn't for them, the huts would not be there today. So very grateful for their help throughout. So I must tell you of a very brief experience of hopping off. And look, I know you guys have been to Antarctica many times, but for me, I must tell you, hopping off that plane, that Hercules in Ross Island, I'm looking at Mount Erebus and I'm thinking, I'm lost. Now, as mariners, we're pretty good at getting our bearings. And but there's no way I could work out where north and south was. And so anyway, never mind that. I just wanted to get to the huts. So fast forward, arrived at Cape Evans Terra Nova hut. And there was three of us. The other two people were from Lands and Survey. So they were out on the ice. They were doing their thing, which allowed me to be in the hut by myself. And I just couldn't believe it. This was like, what a privilege. It was incredible. So I had my gear, I had my sketchbooks, I had my camera, and I was just raring to go. So here we are. I just go back to this photograph here. Rip into the hut, into Scott's Terra Nova hut, Cape Evans hut. And I'm looking at it and going, what? Look at that lot. What am I going to do with that? It was just so many artifacts. And it was like a brick and brack shop to me. It was just so, and I just could not work out, well, how am I going to tackle this? And then I'm thinking, hang on a minute, Sean, just hang on a minute. You've read about it, you've dreamt about it, you've spoken to people about it, you're here. Just take time out. So I stood there for, I reckon, about half an hour. And I'm just soaking it in, just the history, that the ambience, the smell, that incredible silence that only Antarctica can give you. All alone in this hut. And I just kept, you're all alone, Sean. You've got to take all those feelings, that emotion, and you've got to take it back to your Nelson studio, and you've just got to pour that all into your canvases, because that is going to matter. Like I say, you just can't sit at home and look at a photograph of Scott's hut and start painting. You can't do that. It's got to come out in the canvas. And as you well know, those huts have a very, very special, you feel the explorers are there with you. So that's what happened. I just, I did the same for Shackleton's Cape Royds hut, and I did the same for Discovery Hut. Now, I only had a couple of days. So I thought, look, I can't mess around here. I've got to crack on. So I'm thinking, okay, how am I going to photograph so much stuff in only 2 days, 2.5 days? Photograph and sketch. I didn't paint because you can't paint there. You haven't got the time. The only way I figured I could do it was actually to go round the hut and partition it off, if you know what I mean, and sketch and draw and photograph as much as I could and gather that information. And like I say, you do it for the other 2 huts as well. By the end of it, I had so much information and so much material, I could have done a dozen exhibitions. So I got back to the studio, and the work began. But it was an incredible experience. And like I say, you just can't copy that photograph. You've got to go down there, see it, breathe it, and come back with that. And that was all part of the proposal, by the way, as well. So now I've given you some insight into how I got there and how the Antarctic paintings began. So now you can see from the photographs and the drawings how they help me compose each painting. So here's, for example, there was the drawings that I did down in the down in one of that was Cape Evans Hut, Scott's Cape Evans Hut. And just do little notes when you're drawing. I love detail, absolutely love the detail. And again, I'm sure you guys know what I'm talking about. Um, so you focus in on the fabrics, um, the buttons, even the little buttons on the shirt, on the jerseys. Whose jersey was it? The grubby marks. It could have been Scott himself, and you don't know, but that all added to the excitement of the whole thing. The tin mug, the toothbrush, of course, the sewing kits and everything that went with it. So the enamel mugs, that was in one of my paintings. Also painting the huts from the outside. So you're out there in the cold, of course, you got your mittens on and you're just doing a quick sketch. And then you get to know your subject by drawing it. So there's painting Shackleton's Cape Royds hut. What really took, let's say, my interest was how weathered the timbers were. Now, we know that the hut was built of Douglas fir. So when they first built it, it would have been a orangey pinky color. So after, obviously with the brutal storms that they have down there, it goes silver. But I was so fascinated by how smooth and blasted by the wind the timber was. So that's the hut there, and that's probably going back to, as you can see, it's not as it is today, but it is probably going around to the 1950s, something like that. The old boots in Shackleton's Cape Royds hut. There's something about old boots that people love. It's the creases. It's like someone's face. It's like a hand. It's very individual. And I'm looking at this boot and thinking, I just wonder who wore that boot. But of course you can't touch anything there, as you well know. You can't. So you have to use artistic license. So there's some sketches, and you have to place it where you'd like the composition, how would you like the composition to look. So these drawings are very, very special to me, and there's the painting there. So those boots were not actually on that Venesta case. I just put them there in the painting. Scott's Terranova, Cape Evans hut. Again, it's you're out there and you're drawing it from different angles, but I felt that this was the best angle. And that's the hut. It tended to have more of a texture, sort of the tones were more of your pinky color. So I'm actually not sure of the timber that was used for the hut. Probably different than there was Shackleton's Cape Royds hut. But anyway, that's how it looked to me. Very moody. And that's what I wanted to try and put into the paint. When I was there, it was blue sky. I mean, it was 1 degree above. It was beautiful. So, but if I painted that, it wouldn't look very brutal. I need to have that really cold feel to the painting. So again, it's artistic license. Now, Morris will identify with this for sure. So you go through Scott's Terranova hut and you go through the annex, and that's what really caught my eye, was behind the door. Just check out that detail. And I don't think a lot of people, they see the hut as a whole, but just zoom in and you just think of the handle, the Hessian sacks and everything like that. It was probably, what you see there is probably exactly how it was then. And I don't think the Trust, Antarctic Heritage Trust, probably did anything. That's how it is, or was. And that's the painting. So that green bottle was actually further around. It wasn't there. I couldn't touch it. So I moved it in the painting over. And it's like People also like doors because they just want to see what's around the corner. Less is more, so that was the purpose of that painting. And it's in a very fine collection, Morris. So now here's a really cool example. That's the Venesta case, and the painting is called Condiments. Um, and so you see and that's my painting there. So that's what I saw. That's the painting. So again, using license, I just transferred some other condiments from another Venesta case and just added them in to give it a better balance. Um, yeah, and also I added the SS Terra Nova in the painting as well. Night Watchman. Night Watchman. I personally really like this painting. You have the wicker lamp, of course, on the table at Scott's Terra Nova hut, and the enamel mug. Now, that is the detail, my painting, the detail of the top of that wicker lamp, paraffin lamp, sorry. So I just put it in sepia because it gives you can see the detail a lot better. Now, the other thing too is that blue, the blue vase. I was talking to Lizzie Meek from Antarctic Heritage Trust and asking her, what do you think? How did it come about? And she said, well, actually, they believe it was a ginger jar. So, I guess the man wanted to have a little bit of home with them, and it just makes them feel a whole lot better. So, yeah. But yeah, night watchmen, as you know, the night watchmen, they went around the hut while everyone else was in bed. Mail was a big thing. And so this definitely caught my eye, especially it had Terra Nova YS. So that was a very good subject to do. And there's the drawing for it. So I just added in I saw an ink pen close by and some ink, little jars of ink. So I just added that in. And that's the painting. This painting is called Keeping Up Appearances because I can only assume that they would still want to be looking pretty sharp down there as well. So that's sitting on top of a bunk. It wasn't there, I made it up because these other bits and pieces were around the hut. Discovery Hut. Couldn't spend too much time there because it was too damn cold inside. It was freezing. But now you see right at the end there's a Kavoshina brandy bottle sitting in the corner on top of the dog biscuit box. And that's the painting. So the brandy, Kavoshina brandy, and the little cabbage, that was the only painting as is. I didn't have to do a thing. It was just sitting there begging to be painted. So I did. And yeah, with a special dog biscuit box. And that's the detail there. You have to put the wrinkles in I was thinking then, that brandy bottle, right? That would have been probably, I should have contacted Kavoshina in France because that's probably the most subtly brandy bottle in existence when you think about it. So I must get onto that. Here we go, Morris. This painting is called Shackleton's Window. Now, in the hut, Cape Royd's hut, that window, I think it's the east window. And I'm looking at it or through it and thinking, how many times must the explorers been looking through that window and just dreaming of being back home in Britain? Just yearning for the green fields. So yeah, and little story, why is Shackleton's face reflected in the window? Well, the story goes, I was told anyway, Sir Ed Hillary visited the hut. I don't know when, but he did, and what year it was, sorry. But he claims that he was greeted by Sir Ernest Shackleton, welcoming him into the hut. He said he felt very close and he could see him. And that's strong words from Sir Ed. It really is. I thought that was, very, very strong. And you don't take those words lightly when Sir Ed Hillary says that. So anyway, I felt, well, okay, Shackleton, his spirit is there. And it certainly felt the men were very, very close. So hence, Shackleton's spirit or ghost is reflected in the window. And here's the painting. The work was I collaborated with New Zealand Post Collectibles and Antarctic Heritage Trust, and we got together and New Zealand Post had the work featured on collectible stamps, which looked absolutely beautiful. It really, really did. They did such a marvelous job at reproducing this work into stamps, and it was a great honor for them to be. And I think it was 9 versions of the first day cover. There was presentation packs as well, but they were very, very well presented. That was the stamp issue. And that was just prior to the exhibition. It's always hard to let them go. They're your babies for so many years. Yeah, so that's part 1. So part 2. Shackleton. I should actually get closer to the mic too. Shackleton. Such a powerful word, leadership, courage, mystique, and even more so today, increasingly so, particularly as the endurance has been, the wreck has obviously been found. So, it really has, captured people's imagination throughout the world. So why did I take an interest in Shackleton? Because I do admire Scott as much as well. It goes right back to visiting Shackleton's Cape Royds hut, and it was the hunger to know more about the man. And you read so much, you listen, you look at documentaries of Shackleton. And I'm thinking, well, actually, what I did notice was that there was many aspects of this expedition, visual aspects of this expedition that were missing. And for example, we've seen the Frank Hurley photographs, we've seen the other photographs of the expedition, but important parts were not there. For example, the James Caird sailing. There's no photographs of the James Caird actually sailing. There's no photographs of the Endurance sailing. You can see her beset in the ice, or she's with bare poles, she's moored or at anchor, but nothing sailing. There's no images of the men departing the ice floe when it broke up and they sailed and rowed to Elephant Island. So I felt, well, hang on a minute. Let's have a good think about this. I can do this. I can paint and chronicle the whole expedition. I knew it was going to be really, really difficult and very, very challenging. So after my last exhibition was called A Painted Voyage, which, as I mentioned, documented New Zealand's maritime history. I didn't waste any time. I got straight onto it. But I knew also that it was going to take much more than reading books. I've read all the books. You guys have read all the books, no doubt, about Shackleton. You can only do so much. And it really is just a variation on the same story. I needed to talk to people. I needed to talk to people much more knowledgeable than myself. And so the journey began. People from New Zealand, people from the UK. Colin Monteith, he needs no introduction, was a massive help. Massive help. He was very generously sent me some photographs and spoke to me about Elephant Island in South Georgia. Very grateful. Peter Garden, here's an example. Helicopter pilot who pioneered the eradication of pests on the sub-Antarctic islands. Peter very kindly sent me some books on the South Georgia whaling stations, Stromness, Brett Dickon, but most importantly, he sent me some aerial photographs of Cave Cove at South Georgia. And as we know, that's where the James Caird, Shackleton and James Caird landed. And that was very, very important for that painting. Colin Barrett, British historian, extremely helpful throughout and has helped me no end. Stephen Scott Fawcett. You've got Richard McElrea, because let's not forget the Ross Sea Party, which is a part of this exhibition as well. Extremely knowledgeable, and you know the author of the book, the Ross Sea Party. Sailing masters, Dick Morris, legendary sailing master. I needed to critique the paintings for the rigs now, for example. Also, the Endurance is a Barquentine rig. And I also know that the Spirit of New Zealand is also a Barquentine rig. And as we know, there's not many images of her sailing. So good to talk to the master of the Spirit of New Zealand on what particular rigs that he would envisage Captain Frank Worsley would have on Endurance on particular weather conditions. So you can see you're building this picture of what's involved in getting this whole exhibition together. So here we are, over 3.5 years now, which has utterly consumed me, and I've still got a couple of paintings to go. So now, the other thing too about these paintings is that you have to bear in mind that they have to be factually correct, but also, again, you have to use enough artistic license to make them visually appealing to the viewer. So there's a very, very fine line. I had to take into consideration weather conditions. A lot of the time was spent in the direction of the sun over a particular time of the event. So you have to use, you take it, I would say there's probably as much time goes into the research actually as the painting. So yeah, that's the how it all began with the Shackleton paintings. So we'll have a look at some work, and I can just briefly explain again how these came about. We know the Endurance left the Dial at Docks, Southwest India Dock, and we know she sailed down the Thames. And I'm thinking, hang on a minute. I know that she would have sailed right in front of then the Greenwich, well, sorry, now is the Greenwich Maritime Museum, but then it was the Royal Naval College and the Royal Naval Hospital. So there she is there. That's the as a contemporary image of Greenwich. So I'm thinking, hang on a minute, there's the painting, which is not, it's unfortunately digital images are not good on original paintings. They don't really tell you the correct tones. But anyway, it gives you an idea. So you have Endurance sailing past Greenwich Maritime College. And I'm thinking, on August the 1st, was it a day? Well, so I have to stand to be corrected. Was the day that Britain declared war on Germany. So I'm thinking, okay, I can get the prime meridian, which is coming straight down the centre. Endurance sailing in front of Greenwich. You have the main benefactor for the Endurance expedition, which was Sir James Caird. And then I just kept on digging. Sir James Kerr was also the main benefactor for starting off Greenwich Maritime Museum. So for how iconic. Now, he would have seen, sorry, he would, I think he passed away in 1954. But anyway, it's iconic because there you have the building that is such an iconic building for the Holy Grail for Britain's maritime history. And then you have the Endurance, which is such an iconic ship. And this expedition is, is world history. So yeah, it's a painting that has a lot of history attached to it. Endurance sailing, there's no images I've mentioned of Endurance sailing down the English Channel. So I spoke to Dick Morris, sailing master in Nelson, who spent a lot of time flying the waters in the United Kingdom, around the United Kingdom. So, it's a long story, but I won't go into great detail. But the Endurance, she left London or Southwest India Dock, stopped off at Margate. No, not Margate, I beg your pardon. I stand to be corrected. Just excuse me for one moment. The little town outside of England, hang on a minute. It is, Eastbourne, I beg your pardon, Eastbourne. And Shackleton, the Endurance stopped off at Eastbourne for, I think it was for 24 hours. Shackleton went ashore, read about the impending war, contacted Churchill, and Churchill offered the ship and the men for service. And Churchill come back with one word: proceed. And that's a famous one word I think you'll see in any book. We know nothing about Endurance sailing from Eastbourne to Plymouth before she sailed onto Buenos Aires, South Georgia, into South Georgia. What we do know, of course, she was painted white. She had her white frock on, as they say, and I can only imagine, and this is part of the research, that it was probably the prevailing wind was from the northeast, would have been around 15 knots or so. That's what I envisage, and that's the canvas that she would have probably had up during that short passage to Plymouth. Whether Shackleton was on board or not, that's up for debate. Frank Worsley was the captain, our own Frank Worsley, and that's a whole another presentation in itself, by the way. So anyway, they sailed around to Plymouth, and I can only imagine too, that's the first time that Frank Worsley and his crew would have sailed Endurance. So it would have been a kind of a shakedown voyage for him, even though it was so short. And the crew would have been very, very rusty. Remember, many of them were scientists, nothing to do with handling a square rig. So anyway, that's and also she's sailing through the Dover Straits here, and Beachy Head Lighthouse is a beam on her starboard side. And again, that's where the connection to experienced sailing master, in particular Dick Morris, was very, very helpful for me. South Georgia, the whaling stations in South Georgia. South Georgia Heritage Trust in Dundee, I corresponded with them regarding old photographs of the time when Endurance would have been in Grytviken and Stromness. And they very kindly sent me this. There's not much available. So I wanted to emphasize the station master's hut. Manager, I think his name was Solis, Norwegian. Anyway, so that's the hut. That's his hut. That's how the buildings were a year or two either side of when the Endurance arrived there. And I was working out, okay, the direction of the sun. We know that the men transited South Georgia, They arrived late afternoon, and the blue arrow is approximately where the sun would have been transiting South Georgia at that time. And that's the painting of Endurance. Again, these colors are not true. It's only a digital image, so the painting is much darker than that. So you can't see in the just there actually. Does that show up there? Yeah, just there in the painting you have Shackleton greeting Worsley, Crean. Sorry, the Solis, the manager, the station manager, greeting Shackleton, Worsley, and Tom Crean, just in that at the hut there, and all these little guys here are crowding around, as in you're reading about, thinking, what's going on here? These long bearded, dirty looking guys, they were scared. I think they were running off after them. But so yeah, that's the painting of South Georgia Stromness whaling station. We can't forget the Ross Sea Party, and it would be morally not right to include them in this incredible expedition. And Richard McElrea helped me immensely with this subject. And as you can see, the Scots Terra Nova hut in the background, and Terra Nova's, sorry, no, that's Aurora moored outside, and they're laying the anchors out there. So they're using the lifeboats to put these bow anchors out. So she's held fast. And then, of course, they had the stern anchors out after that. And as you know, the anchors are still there today. So she broke her anchors, and then she drifted north for, God, how many months was it? It was over a year, can't think. Anyway, she drifted north during that terrible storm, which left the Ross Sea Party alone in Antarctica. So, yeah, quite unfortunately, quite a tragic time for them people. And yeah, it's something that, of course, we must acknowledge. And in many ways, it is important, and probably more important in many ways than the Endurance expedition, aside, and the Woodall Sea Party, I should say. Yeah, studio. There's only 21 paintings, but I'm going to show you 4 or 5 tonight. Sorry, that's all you're going to get. So the studio is there's a sextant which is very similar to the one that Frank Worsley would have used on the James Caird, and there's some works in progress. So as you can see, the drawings are here, and that's the canvas there. So it's all done by drawings, and as I say, there's very little photographs to actually go on. Very, very few. Actually, as you see there, that's the painting of the James Caird approaching South George, Cave Cove, almost complete. This is nothing to do with the expedition, of course. That's actually a Shackleton whiskey bottle, the McKinley whiskey bottle, on the windowsill at Cape Royds hut. And that was a painting I completed for a client just about 6 months ago now. And that's just to give you an indication of my maritime painting. That's a Cuddy Sark. She's thundering along under full sail. So yeah, she's, I guess, one of my favourite vessels of all time. And that's a classic yacht in Auckland, or was in Auckland. She's in Wellington now, I think. That's the Viking, just coming around North Head up in Auckland tightening up into a southwest wind. And there we have it. That's the that's a little bit of detail of a James Caird um, sailing through from Passage Elephant Island to South Georgia. And as we know, that was a 800 nautical mile journey, 16 days. Incredibly, it's. I always, in fact, I had a Radio New Zealand interview today with Jesse Mulligan in afternoons, and we spoke about Frank Worsley because, in my view, anyway, um, he deserves much more recognition than the New Zealand public give him. He's such an iconic figure. He's our own. And well, I think we all know the important role that Frank Worsley played in the whole Shackleton endurance expedition. And as a mariner myself, and obviously as our training, we go through a lot of training in terms of sextant work and navigation. How on earth he managed to do take 4 meridian altitudes, in other words, 4 noonday sights. That's like when the sun comes down to the horizon at smack on 12 o'clock Greenwich Mean Time to get a latitude. But of course, there's no longitude, so he had to use his dead reckoning skills. And dead reckoning at sea is a very, very skilled part of navigation. Remember then, there's no electronics. It was just, his hands must have been absolutely frozen to the core. He had a 22 and a half foot boat that was half full of water, ice, they were starving, and he still managed to do his navigation calculations, and he would have had to write that down. How on earth did he do that? He had his nautical, when you're doing celestial navigation, you have to have an almanac. And in the almanac, you have all your workings for that year. He would have had to have a site reduction tables. There's a 3 or Norwich tables, but they are tables that you have to look to calculate your position. But he couldn't, because he could only get a latitude. So he had to use dead reckoning. In other words, he had to estimate the weather, obviously how far he was being pushed to the north or to the south. And as we know, when they saw South Georgia, it was like that was solely through Frank Worsley's exceptional navigational skills. In comparison, Tom Crean, as we know, is obviously a riveting and an iconic figure in this whole heroic age of exploration. Ireland celebrate Tom Crean by naming their research vessel after him. They also have his face on their national carrier, or that was anyway. But they treat him as an absolute hero. So, and I know the Antarctic Heritage Trust are doing everything to try and let's say teach or put Frank Worsley out there into our history as one of our greatest mariners of all time. So from a guy from Akaroa, he'd done extremely well.